Hello and welcome to Nerd Shack. This is a very thrown together video to jump on the bandwagon of Cathode Ray Dude's recent video about the Dell Wise little guy. In that video, which you should watch all of CRD's videos, they have a thin client based on a quad-core Intel Atom, and at one point they exclaim,
There it is. That's the Dell Weiss 3040, and that is the smallest Intel Atom machine I have ever personally seen.
Now, I'm not sure if Gravis meant a fuller PC than this, if there was some qualifier I didn't pick up on there, but I want to talk about it anyway because I just think it's neat. This is the Hannspree Micro PC. Yes, that's the display company, Hannspree. It was released in 2015 featuring a quad-core Intel Atom CPU, but it shipped with Windows 8. This thing is basically a Fire Stick. We've got an integrated HDMI port, a USB-A, micro USB for power, and a micro SD slot. And it's tiny. The external size, including the HDMI plug, is 111 by 38 by 9.8 millimeters. It's less than a centimeter thick. So let's boot it up and talk a bit more about it. We just need 2 amps on the micro USB and there's a power button on the front edge. So the CPU is an Atom Z3735. Launched in 2014, it's 4 cores at 1.33 GHz base and 1.83 boost, with a scenario design power of 2.2 watts. That sounds slow. Like the newer Atom that Gravis was looking at, this one is also limited to 2 GB of RAM, which is what's installed in the Hannspree. It feels like a very arbitrary limitation that I'm sure you could take advantage of more memory with one of these. Besides that, we have onboard Wi-Fi in N flavour, Bluetooth 4.0 and 32 GB of eMMC as the boot drive. So, what's this thing actually like to use? Well, once it gets going, it feels like most low-end PCs with eMMC. It's enthusiastic, but confused easily. I'm going to leave some B-roll running while I talk through this, just me opening some important documents and trying to do some multitasking so you get a feel for it. Anecdotally, I bought mine around 2016 intending to use it as a thin client to remote to my desktop. I never ended up using it like that because it was just a bad idea, but it did become the way I watched YouTube for a year or so on my dumb TV. YouTube at 1080p worked, but anything 60 FPS was a no-go. And if Windows was downloading an update in the background, you can kind of forget all of it. I later moved it to the TV in my bedroom and got Ubuntu running on it. This avoided the problem of Windows updates and made everything run a little bit better. Plus, I found out that Kodi could actually play back decent bitrate 1080p HEVC, which was kind of useful. The main performance issue is thermal throttling, and I actually ended up graphing it with a simple stress test. Here is CPU temperature and frequency over time, and you can see the sawtooth pattern developing as the CPU hits 70 degrees, throttles back to 800 MHz, and then jumps back to full speed once it's lost a bit of heat, and the cycle just repeats. This is perhaps the best moment to steal another CRD feature, and reveal I actually have 2 of them, but this one's naked. The Windows unit I've been demoing I came across on eBay by chance about a year ago, and I actually hadn't turned it on until yesterday. Yeah, hoarding is a bit of a problem of mine. In fact, getting Windows working at all was a royal pain in the arse. The previous owner had factory reset it, I'm fairly sure of that, the Windows OOB was covered in Hannspree logos, but there were no drivers, including for like Wi-Fi and stuff. Plus, for some reason, the Microsoft Media Keyboard that I used with my original stick for many years just didn't work at all. And when I dug out my emergency peripherals, the mouse pointer was invisible, but the mouse was moving and I could click on things, and I've never encountered that before. I don't want to imagine the deep circle of hell that leads to a connected mouse working but not displaying. That sounds like something we should not talk about. But now I've revealed my secret, I guess we can switch over to my original unit here and see what Linux looks like. I just need to... Yeah, sure, that'll be fine. So, yep, it's Linux. It's not 100% straightforward to do this because the Micro PC only supports 32-bit EFI despite having a 64-bit CPU, and not many distributions still offer that. When I set this up many years ago, I had to Frankenstein together the 32-bit EFI from a different distribution into the install media for what I actually wanted to set up. It seems like that's still the way to do it. I found a blog post from 2020 by Sam Bartle where they basically outline the same process. Let's have a look at a few major parts of the motherboard then. Clearly this is the bare die of a CPU, and since this is a system on chip, I'm guessing it probably contains a lot of other stuff. There are 4 RAM chips, 2 on the front, 2 on the back, along with our 32GB of eMMC by Kingston. The only other parts of note are the AXP288D, which is a power management chip designed for low power Bay Trail and Cherry Trail systems, and the wireless hardware under an RF shield near the antenna. That antenna comes off on a little separate circuit board that's mounted in the end of the case, and there's the power LED back here too. I took my original unit apart to see what the thermal solution looked like given the thermal performance. This poor Atom was cooled with just a thermal pad and a very thin aluminium plate. I don't have the original to show, but just imagine this plate from the other side, maybe twice as thick. No wonder it thermal throttles. I was even trying to fix the thermals for a while. I designed and printed a new case that increased the thickness from 10 to about 25mm, but allowed for a lot more heatsink and a small 20mm fan. This is actually a few test prints in and it's basically done. You can get to all the ports and stuff. The only other things I had left to do was work out how the power button was going to work and how I was going to apply some pressure to the heatsink. But by this point I had basically stopped using the device, so it fell by the wayside. Maybe I'll revisit and finish this project off at some point. So how did Hannspree end up selling this thing? As best I can tell, this is a rebadged Intel compute stick. Specifically, I think it's the elegantly named STCK, like stick, 1A32WFC, because the specifications are identical. There's even an AnandTech review of that Intel stick that contains faint praise like, the CPU performance is not as bad as we feared, and describes it as a typical first generation product. There are certainly applications where the kit would be perfect, but general purpose day-to-day computing is not one of them. Interestingly, it sounds like that Intel unit also had a tiny fan, which, I mean, I'm sure it didn't move much air, but it probably helped. Back in 2016, Hannspree had the Micro PC prominently displayed in the PC section of their website. But besides the specs and some reviews, there wasn't much else to see. Later on, its presence is reduced to a link to a very random set of FAQs, which include things like how to disable Windows Update and free up disk space. Huh, why would anyone need to do that? There was also a recovery image buried in there, which is no longer available, but amazingly I still had the copy I downloaded in 2016, so I've put that up on archive.org, the link is in the description. The education page on their current live site still mentions, but doesn't picture, the Micro PC, so they clearly had a go at the education market, but I don't think that went too well. I guess Hannspree was either one of the few OEMs who went along with the compute stick thing, or they just found a really cheap source for them somewhere in 2015. My conclusion on this thing, it's a difficult device to love, but in a pinch, it's a perfectly serviceable little guy. Basic browsing or word processing totally work without a problem. With a slightly more competent thermal solution, I think it could even still work as a TV stick, certainly for 1080. So that's the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Gravis, if you're watching, I'm now throwing the challenge back to you to find a smaller Atom PC. Comment away if anyone has encountered this device before, or any of the compute stick kind of devices really. I mean, I remember them being a thing, but besides the Hannsprees, I never saw one. There are a fair few reviews of this thing from launch though, so it did get some press. I assume they are out there somewhere. Anyway, thanks everyone. I'll see you again soon. Goodbye.